just to give you a little bit of history of here, I formed a friends group about 12 months ago.
Sorry.
And been working hard to get different working bees going because of all the weeds in here. There's Japanese pepper, there's morning glory, there's all sorts of weeds. So we've done a couple of working bees so far and got to the point of where it's going ahead, and linking in with the city of Bayswater. They own that land there. We're on actually planning commission land here, and there's several owners, so it's been a little bit of a process to bring it all into so as we could start doing the working bees. Only I've known Noel for many, many years, been out on the country with him, and had some good times in some very secret places, I suppose, isn't it? Where we learnt quite a bit about Nyoongar culture, and it's very enlightening. So if you link it into, if you tell me some facts I learn, if you tell me the truth, I trust. If you tell me stories, they stop in my heart forever. So that's what Nyoongar stories to me, they've really got to a point of where I'm learning all the layers. I stopped up half the night last night thinking, what will I say to introduce Noel? Only I think there's just two words. Welcome to Noel Nannup. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. Never been introduced like that before. With that, the stories and the truth and everything, that's great. So, for us to be able to take away from today a better understanding, one of place and two of people that know this place better than anyone, I'm going to need to do a little bit of a foundation. So there's a bit of a base that you can build on to take away and understand and process and go from there. So with the youngsters, bear with me for a few minutes. I have to do this so that the adults can take this away and understand, and yourselves as well, and take it on into the future. So for us as Aboriginal people connected to this piece of country, what we have and have lived under for thousands of years, science tells us it's about 63,000 years now, is a way of moving across the land so you don't take too many resources from one place. And we did that in a 6-season cycle. That meant we would move from one camp to the next camp to the next camp. And a complete year would take you around to 6 different major campsites. Obviously there were other campsites all the way along as well, but the main ones where everyone stayed, clearly known and understood, and obviously those campsites have to have water. And when you have that, you can't go wrong. Your kidneys love you forever, because we need water. Food, you know, we could probably do without for a while, particularly me at the moment. But water, 24 hours and you're in trouble. So the key to it is water. So every person that was born into this system was born in a catchment. That meant the rainfall would fall, the water would flow, and people followed that water. and they had to know where every drop of water came from in their catchment and where every drop of water would go to. And as they did that, the firm belief was that the spiritual world actions the physical. So that brings me to where I need to follow correct protocol. Wara wern, bulyakangan, bad spirit, go away. Wara means bad. Wern is the spirit itself. Bulyakan is when they go and they don't want to be. But we believe the vibration breaks into the spirit world and they're off. I heard them going in that wind. None is from more. So, wara wern, bulyakangan. Once they're gone, that leaves a void that can only be filled by a good spirit. I'm going to ask that good spirit to come and join us. Poberdan Jinjin, Ngaladad Nini. Good morning. Please join in. The good spirits have arrived. Poberdan means good. Ngala is all of us. Jinjin, you're in the presence of the best spirit possible in this part of the world. And it's feminine. Darch is our flesh and Yinning is to sit. So I've asked this good spirit to come and sit with us and on us. That means now I need to orient you and let you know exactly where we are on country. Hence, I told you about the 6 seasons. Each of those seasons lasts about 8 weeks. Do you know that 12 of those weeks were spent on the beach? And even the little kindy kids can tell us what we'd be eating when we're at the edge of the sea. So the people would have been there taking in lots of omega-3, getting themselves ready for cooler months of the year. And each of those seasons has its own diet. So when I say 12 weeks, it's not all of one season and half of another. It's all of one season and half of 2 others. So that, a quarter of 2 others. And that gives you the 12 weeks. So 8 weeks is a season we call Bunaroo. And that's when you're on the beach. It's nice and warm and hot. So, like most people now, during the hot conditions, people want to be by the sea. We were no different. And then half of the season before that, and half of the season ahead of that. Or a quarter of the season, sorry. So that gives you 8, 9, 10 on that end, and 11, 12 on that end. And then after being on the beach eating lots of seafood, people would then move inland and follow the rivers. And as they followed the rivers, that would take them up over the scarp for the cold winter months. And that's where most people camp, over the scarp. When it was freezing cold, we call it netting the cold time. And then of course another diet comes into it. Each season has its own colour. So try and imagine that. As you're going through this area, there's hundreds of species of flowers and plants that have those flowers. So straight away, what you have there is plants that are full of chemicals, and our people knew and understood those chemicals. And it was the women that would teach the boys and the girls until the boys were about 8 years old. And then we'd start learning from older boys. And there was this structure, getting a bit warm for me, of learning and learning and learning, and you just never stop learning. You don't live long enough to learn everything. Okay, so passing through here, when they came off the coast, then there would be camps that would fill in until they reached the major campsite. So the secondary camps, there'd probably be one up on the rise up there, out of the swamp and the marshy land here. Probably more further along, once again up out of this area. You only came down in here to collect food. And the types of food, we'll talk about those for you while you're here. And we'll sit down here as long as we can, and I'll leave the main food sources for us to just get up and go for a little wander. As the weather looks like it's going to do the right thing. If it does change, well, of course, it'll cause us to have to take the necessary action to be able to keep ourselves as dry as possible. As the 6 season cycle worked, there were times when birds would migrate into here and then out of here. And as they migrated, of course, there'd be birds that would nest here, producing eggs, and small birds that, young ones that would be collected, I guess, for food once they got big enough. And down in the water itself, still more fish. And all of these things were forming part of your diet. Don't forget, there's 11 species of frogs as well that were eaten. And they were all through here. You can still hear them calling over there now. And so you've got this range of food. Most people call us having all this opportunity from further north and east in the old way, call this the land of plenty. And the word used is Puntaban. Puntaban means place of plenty. So you had lots and lots and lots of food. Even this green plant you see growing right here and dominating. When that's young and it grows, you'll see it do this. Grow, and the sun comes out, and it will come out like that. When you see it doing that, you know that it's edible. It is giving to you. No great secret. It's just knowing and understanding all of these plants. If you see one that's like that opening out, be careful. It's telling you there could be toxins in me, or some other thing that will cause you a bit of angst, like tiny little fibres on the stem. And as you walk through them, those little fibres have barbs on them, and they'll go into your legs. And as they go into your legs, of course, because they have barbs, they don't come back out again. And you'll be scratching like this to get them out. And it can be a real problem. So the general rule of thumb, if it has a pea-shaped flower, like that flower on that hat, see it? You don't eat it. on this hat just here. There. Just, if you like, pass that around if you don't mind. People can see typical pea-shaped flower.
You would not eat that.
The beans, no. Other flowers, of course. There's one that's a Canedia. I don't know if you know it. They grow flat on the ground like a creeper with a red flower, commonly called a cocky's tongue. Those you can eat the whole blossom. And they were eaten in huge numbers. There's also another plant that grows in the area called a Templetonia. And more coastal, likes a bit of salt air. When you eat that too, it's the flower, you can eat the whole flower. Beautiful to eat. And also the new flush of leaves that come onto things and grow. So, as you moved through here, you would camp up on the area up there. Now, when you get over there, completely different plants growing there. Hakeas, grevilleas, what else would we have? Banksias, those types of plants in deep sandy soil. Then you have a whole suite of pollinators for those flowers, and most of them are honey eaters. And the bronze-winged pigeon that you saw earlier frequents there because there's a plant called a gastrolobium, and gastrolobiums are toxic. They have poison and they have a pea-shaped flower. A lot of people call them egg and bacon. Have you heard of them?
Oh, yeah.
So please be careful. It's a nice one to show, that one. Very good. All right, so as we build this little foundation now, just try and imagine a group of our people wandering through here. Would they necessarily have a trail right down here at the edge? Probably not. But they most definitely would have one along that ridge. Well-worn path going that way. And the same on the other side. Back off the river and high up on the ridge. And as they travelled through there, then of course, wherever there was a spring coming up like along here, it's just springs everywhere. And beautiful sweet water is running out of those springs into the river. Children would be allowed to drink out of those springs. They would not be allowed to drink out of the river. Only the elders could do that. And elders are 45 years and older, okay? That's just to give you an idea of the old way. And like I said, plenty of food. Lots and lots of food. The skink you saw this morning, Agurnia kingii, that was a snack. Children would love to catch those, just grill them on the fire. The stomach content would be rolled out of it, and the rest of it would be beautiful to eat, like fast food. Whereas if it was the shingleback, the old slow bobby, we call it the bobtail, that's slow food. And of course that would be the old people's food, and once again full of things that are medicinal for older people to eat. And lizards were often caught way out across the country as people travelled. And I've shown David lizard traps out on rocks and sea as well. Been out there with us. And it's awesome to see. Wow, you see that butterfly? Maybe it was a moth. I've heard them called a cabbage moth. It's in a bit of a hurry. Must know something we don't know. Okay, so I think now we've got a bit of a foundation. The dominating trees in this area, paperbarks, melaleucas they are commonly called, and we call them mudra. Okay? Mudra. She oaks, they dominate right through here. There's one just there with the needle leaves. Beautiful tree. And another one leaning out there. You can see more and more and more. We call them quell. Quellalal simply means the tree of names, the tree of our ancestors, the tree of knowledge. If any of you have seen the movie Avatar, that is the tree, that species. And being the tree of our ancestors, that means under the ground there, the root system all through here, they have what is called mycorrhizals, tiny little fungus, and there's heaps and heaps of it. And as we sit here, all of us are losing skin that's falling into the soil. And one of the best plants to take up that skin is the she oak. And as it does that, we believe our DNA is in those trees. And it doesn't just select you because you're, can I say, white or black or whatever. It chooses you because you're a human being and you have skin. So then, it's our belief that that tree knows you and even your name. That's why we give it that mantle, the tree of name and the tree of knowledge. You notice that wire just start to come in and settle on it? It's awesome when you can tune in and feel that. The honeyeaters are quite vocal. There's the brown, there's the singing, there's the New Holland, there's the spiny cheek. There'll be a few others there. There's one called chakalak. We call it chakalak. All the others go under a category that we call gingy. And that means they're honey eaters and they pollinate the plants out there, out of here. They have feathered tongues and very few of them eat anything other than nectar. Whereas you'll find the odd one now and again like chakalak, which is the red-lobed wattle bird. It has long lobes. The adults usually chuckle when I say it's the Dory Evans of the bird world, which means they cannot keep a secret. Now there's a dark honeyeater there, family of 3. Yeah, New Holland, training the youngsters how to fly. Beautiful. Yes, so they're not a true honeyeater. That's the red-lobed wattle bird. And they eat insects as well. Then you've got a whole suite of birds that do eat insects like the restless flycatchers. And you have the grey fantail. And obviously everyone knows the one that can't keep still, black and white. Everyone remember it? Who can tell me what it is? Chitty Chitty, the woolly wagtail. Beautiful little bird. Do you know that all of these birds have their own story, their own song, their own dance, and their own art? And when we have that, that means we can teach the children as they're growing into adulthood and learning along the way. And for Chitty Chitty, which was my dad's totem, there's a little song that goes, Chitty chitty maru, canning, canning, chitty chitty maru, canning, canning. Warrenjamunga, Jenna Werdu. Warrenjamunga, Jenna Werdu. And when you do that part, you've got to know the story and the meaning of it. So chitty chitty is the bird. It's going out looking for food, obviously. It's hungry. That's the warrior. Munga is to store it, stores it in its tummy. Warrenjamunga. Then Jenna are the feet. And Werdu is tired. So the feet and the legs get tired and it lays down and has a sleep. And that's what that little song is all about. And as you're singing and teaching and the children are learning, they're also learning the language. They have to get the language precise. So they're always in school. Not between whatever it is time in the morning, whatever it is time in the afternoon we have now. Every minute of the day you are learning. And that learning can come through dreams. So you could be sleeping. So you're still learning. And as you're learning and understanding, you're connected into a group of people that have travelled through here for thousands of generations and thousands of years. It seems so easy to say. Do we really grasp the concept of how long it is? In today's world, it's not easy. There's so much going on that takes our thought away and takes our main focus off of being people. Because as people, we need to look after each other. We need to care. We need to understand. We need to be more community oriented. And sadly, we're losing that. And it's not going to get better. As technology advances, we'll all be there in the queue waiting for our next new model phone. We'll be all in the queue looking for the new TV, whatever it's like, the new cars, etc. But we have to hang on to this as well. Because this is who we are. It belongs to us and we belong to it. And if you look at this piece of land here, it's not healthy. So that means we aren't healthy either. You look at that river. It looks okay, but it's in trouble. We need to look after it. And if we do, guess what? It'll look after us. Okay, so do you want to go for a little wander? Everyone right for that? Bit of a walk?
Yep.
How's the cloud looking? We'll let that look after itself, shall we? Forgive me if I have to wear my sunnies. I was a tour guide up in the Kimberley, and I used to do boat tours on the Fitzroy River. And the reflection off the water took its toll on my eyes. And I get a headache if I don't put my sunnies on in the sunshine now. Okay? Good. Now don't forget, anytime you youngsters, you want to ask a question, please feel free to do that. That's the best way to learn. Okay? Adults as well. Last time I left that in there, I packed it away. I think we'll just go straight over to the path. And remember, bicycles and other people use the path. So if we could just use one side of it. Folks, if you want to be 100% sure that the water you're going to drink is as pure as you can get it, always go where those ducks go. They're known as Pacific black ducks, even though they're brown. And they will not drink anything other than the purest and sweetest water that's possible. There is another duck that does that too, and it's called a pink-eared duck. We call it eridu. And they will drink beautiful sweet water, and these ducks too. And I'll guarantee you they're there on that little soak there because there's beautiful water coming up there from a spring. There's a bike coming along there, folks. And those ducks, when they nest, they'll find a spot in here somewhere where they feel reasonably secure and safe. Good morning. And then they'll hatch their young. Once they've hatched them, you'll often see them coming out of parks. They're doing that right now, this time of year. Coming out of little isolated pieces of natural vegetation or someone's garden, and then they'll march across the road, and Mum's walking along with about 8 or 9 of these young ones following along behind. And unfortunately in today's world there's all this vehicular traffic, bikes, and us walking, and it causes them angst. But they cope. It's called adaptation. And we had to adapt too as people when the tall ships came here and the people intended to stay. So we adapted. And despite all of that modern world, we're still here, hanging on to our knowledge the best we can. And not only hanging on to it, but being willing to share it with others, because that's the fabric of who we are. We are sharers and we are carers. And we can't fight against that, because the strongest spirit in this part of the world is feminine. And whenever you have feminine, of course it's caring and nurturing and warmth. And the children would know that mums give the greatest hug and make you feel secure and safe. So we're coming from that point of view. As you listen, you can hear a frog. It sounds like something tapping. Hear it? Back in there? Wow. If I told you the Latin name of that, I'd only be showing off. It's a beautiful little frog. And it's so tiny. You know there's a larger one that lives here, the blotchy frog? But it likes deep sand, so it'll be up in that area there, in that sandy ridge. Makes a completely different noise to that. Then there's another one just in here, and it's ring, ring. You hear that? Just in there. That one. So I've got 3 there nailed already. And that blotchy one. Now, I heard the French eat frog, but they only eat the legs, they reckon. We eat the lot. And you can cook them, just gently roast them, and the stomach content is emptied out and rolled away, and then you just eat the rest. There's cartilage, but no bones. And yeah, get quite a snack out of that. That one there is so tiny, if you could see it, it's probably with my thumb to look at. Tiny little thing. Snack. Snack. Well, good for these ones, little ones, you know, because it sparks their interest. They're easy to catch, and in the early stages of life, that's what you need. You need that interest. And then, of course, this area is still being used by the children, because they come down and build cubby houses in here, ever the opportunists. And they'll take all of those opportunities if they live locally. And why wouldn't you? It's about adapting and knowing and understanding what's here. Then of course that brings me to this. You have to be really careful around the swamps here because there are snakes. And a really dangerous one is commonly called the tiger snake. And they're here. You'll hear them before you see them, mostly. They go, they make a noise like that. And we call them Norn, because that's the noise they make.
Is it like to
No.
warning? No.
What it's actually doing is calling to another snake. You're waiting for the response, I'm here, where are you? And the other one will respond, I'm over here. And they know then where they are, each other. Birds do that, of course, as well. We just need to know and understand their language. And our people did, because we had a totemic system. Totemic system means we have totems. And remember I said my dad's totem was Chitty Chitty the Woolly Wagtail? It has a song, it has a dance, it has a story, it has art. And as you learn that, you know, you might have the little woolly wagtail, you might have a frog, and you learn everything about your frog. You see what I mean? Listen to that. Wow, they've turned it on, haven't they? Like an orchestra. It's beautiful. Despite this having introduced plants here as well, you know, old way, a lot of this grass and stuff you see here wouldn't have been here. There's a type of lawn they call kikuyu. It can get in here and choke things out, and all the other different types of weeds and things. But despite all that, there's still some incredible things going on here that have a connection way back to the old times. Eucalyptus trees play a really important role. They obviously take up lots of water, but they're a boarding house. Can you imagine all the little birds and plants and animals that benefit from a tree like that? Wow. Stunning. And you'll find them always along the rivers. They have what is called a beautiful smell in the leaf when you crush them. They belong to what is called a myrtaceae. And myrtaceae are plants that have those leaves, you crush them and smell them. Beautiful smell. There's smaller ones like these little plants, shrubby plants along the edge here. Some of them underneath. Even the paper bark. Crush their leaves and smell them. It's beautiful. That's all the daytime things. You know there's nighttime birds here as well. When they have really thick areas like that in there, you'll get these birds that come out at night. Anyone know what they're called? Some go. Owls. We refer to them as Nyoongar. And Nyoongar is a night bird. Many different types, including the ones that go down and catch fish at the edge of the water. They're called night herons. They live along here in the thick. In the daytime they get in under there in the dark as possible, and that's where they live. And awesome that there's a place like this. Just a little bit of work on it, and bring it back to the old way. Introduce weeds there, look at that green water hyacinth. You might have some in your fish pond at home, you know, they're little glass fish tanks. And if it's emptied somewhere, away it goes. That'll choke out waterways, so you've got to be careful. This water running here will be reasonable sweet, but I wouldn't drink it because it has pollutants in it, you know. Pollution from the path here as people walk along and bikes go along. Bits of metal that are wearing out on the bikes and rubber from the tyres and shoes and all of that get washed into there. They call them heavy metals, so we have to be really careful.
What about from the spring?
From the spring itself where it's coming out of the ground? Wow,
Fine.
that's where you'd be fine. Yep. If Kim Jong-un does the wrong thing, you might need to go and have a drink out of there one day, just to be safe. And it's handy to know these things, you know. Yeah. So that would be your source of where you'd get a drink. Once it gets into here, it's heading on, eventually it will make its way into that water source down there. Remember, everyone's born in a catchment? This is part of the catchment, and that water's running down across the land. So you know where the water coming from here is in the spring, and where it's going to is the river. Then when you get down near the river's edge, if you just turn around and look back across, can you see that white, feathery type, I'll call it a flower, sticking up above the plants down there? That's a weed introduced, and it grows like a weed once it gets established. I used to know the name of it, I can't remember it anymore. There'll be someone here that's worked in the catchment who'll know it. Pampas grass, that's it. Pampas grass. Well, just this side the pampas grass is another special plant called typha. And maybe we can go closer to it and talk about it a little closer. I can see some just up here. So shall we make our way down along there? We'll go and have a look at it. As we head along there, in the hot summertime you might see the odd turtle coming out and walking along here. They look for places when the water's starting to dry up and make their way down to the river. Another snake called a dugarch. We call it a dugarch. Most people call them a dugite. Get a bird, the stay in place bird, one place bird. See it hovering? Now it's moving again. It'll stop. Bite coming. And some people call them a letter-winged kite because it looks like the letter M on their back. And we always call them a stay-in-one-place bird. There's nothing really imaginative about it. But they put their shadow on a lizard or a small snake. And as they do that, they shake the wings. And if it moves, they'll go down lower and stop again. She'll keep their shadow on it and then just dive straight down and grab it. And they do that all day. Obviously they need the sun shining, so they've got a shadow. Japanese peppercorn, that one, introduced. Probably was in someone's garden up here. And the seeds. You know when you have your pepper and they have those twister ones? It's a round black seed, some are red. That's the seeds off of plants like this and gets that taste. So that's where the Japanese pepper is. Thick veg like that up there, doves would nest in there, some of the wattle birds.
No, your arms.
That's it, beauty. Here we go. On the coastal plain when our people were here, heading across from here to the hills or coming back in again, they'd always harvest these. If you cut these off below the water, they'll drown and die. If you cut them off above the water, then obviously they'll keep living. But the root systems on these, our people would get in there, pull them out, clean them off in the water, and then stack them, depending how many people there were. And then they'd know how many people, like when Mum cooks skitty blogs or stew or anything like that, she knows how many people are going to be eating it, so she cooks the right amount. It's the same with this. Then once you've done that, on a log with a piece of wood, or on stone with another stone, and they would sort of crush it and make it into a mushy paste. And once that had happened, the little dampers, and cook them. Very starchy to eat, but goes really well with omega-3. So this was also used as people made their way out to the hill. And Typha is the Latin name for it. We call it Yanjit. Yanjit? You heard of Yanjit? You heard of Manji? Further south, there's a dialect that calls it Manji, as in Manjimup, or as in Yanchip. But here it's Yanjet. And Yanjit is this plant.
Is it bulrush?
I've heard it called that. But this provided a huge amount of food for people on the coastal plain. And it's most easily accessed after fire. So people would burn certain sections and pieces of country, keep it open, and then have easy access. What do you think had happened to the snakes if you burnt it? They wouldn't stay there, would they? They'd be out of there. So that's why it was burnt. Plus also, the heat would cause it to think it's going to die. So it would take in huge amounts of more moisture and food into it, which is obviously what you need when you're eating it. And thrives on fire. Once the fire is burnt through, grows away again. And it's not long, a year or two, and it's back to being dense again. Lots of frogs in there. Awesome. There's that bird that just landed up on the tree. That's the one that was hovering, if I'm right. The letter-winged crow. See if there's anything down there worth looking at. Maybe we can find a small one of these opening to show you. There's lots of stuff in there.
So is it not being cleared because it's not council land?
I
Planning land or
think
something?
it just changed from. We're off roughly on the border between council land and planning land now, aren't we?
Yeah, about here,
Yeah.
somewhere here.
So, yeah, it's just out of the way and out of sight and out of mind.
And this is Bayswater.
This is
My
Bayswater
council.
land, yeah. Just straight in front of the flats they own.
Yeah.
That's Bayswater from about there down, and Planning Commission back that way.
Okay.
Let's just move over this side. Remember I told you about the opening and giving? If you look at the tips of these, a good one there. See, they're like little hands closed like that, but they're opening this way. They're going to give to you. to say that you can eat what's under the ground there.
I always thought they were introduced. Do they?
No, they're right at home here. Right at home. I can't remember the name of these now.
Bracken?
Bracken, that's it. Bracken. That's the common name, bracken. I don't do this often enough.
The new shoots you're going to eat as well, is that right?
Yes. You know, they're like asparagus. That when they're small and just coming up, they grow really quickly and you can eat them. Oh, there's a fig tree in there. I quite like figs. But there's some that grow in there that don't have fruit. There's something about them, I don't know what it is. So try and imagine what this was like before the path was put in. That path's now like a big dam stopping the water that used to run through. So that used to be the spring. The water would be all the way down through there to the river. Full of all of this activity, this little ecosystem, nurturing all this food. Frogs, birds' eggs, birds themselves, the tytha, the yanjit, the bracken, lots and lots of food.
Bees.
Native bees, yes. The bees we have now are introduced. Those yellow and black ones. Apparently they're from Italy. Italian bees. They really sting. The native bees do not sting. And they're tiny like flies, smaller than flies, some of them. Yeah. Okay. I don't think we're going to go much going that way. Apart from seeing the acacia, the wattle there with the yellow flowers up on the top part of it. When they flower prolifically, I mean they have lots and lots and lots of flowers and they're really yellow. You know there's going to be lots of thunderstorms in the warmer months. You can guarantee it. And they've been doing that for the last 2 or 3 years.
Bugs coming.
Is that something to do with like the static or something in the...
It could well be. Yeah. Getting too technical now. Beautiful thing. All right, so I think we've wandered far enough this way. We'll just make our way back.
Pleased to know that these belong here. I always
native?
thought they were.
No, they belong here. No, that's introduced. That's what David was calling the morning glory. Bike coming. See, that was loaded. That's enough for me to say, "Hoo-hoo, look out. Thunderstorms are coming." Yeah.
No, I'm not.
No.
Not really, yeah.
And that's down
I've always done that. Yes, so while we can see the river, let's just talk about some of the things that are in the river that you can eat. This far up the river, you'll get qualla the mullet, and they're a fish that has to always tell you where they are. So sometimes you can go down to the river and you can see in the sunshine and you'll all of a sudden see a flash, like a mirror. Or if you're really lucky and there's a big school of them, they'll all turn at once. And it's like the whole river goes, flash, here I am. Well, that's the fish. Because in the dreaming there's a story about them. And that story was they were going to be so mean they wouldn't let anything eat them. They'd have poison in them. And then that was their idea. And this is the story you always tell to the children, not to be mean and not to be, someone that is selfish. So as they were thinking that and planning that, the birds all got together and they said, but there'll be that many of you when you lay your eggs and you're up in the water holes, then and the water runs out and the sun dries out the water holes, you'll all die and there'll be this putrid water that'll kill birds and it'll kill animals and it'll kill people even. You can't do that. And there's no sense there being millions and millions and millions of you. You've got to share and keep your numbers lower than that. So as that was all being worked through, it was agreed then in the dreaming that those fish would show where they are all the time. So when birds fly over them, you'll always see the water go. You might not see the flash, but you'll see the water as they flick up the water because they're so close to the surface. And then when you're at a vantage point like this and you're thinking, shall I go fishing? You'd watch the birds, you'd see the birds fly over and you'd see the flash. You'd say, ha ha, follow the mullets there, let's go. And then you go and get them. Do you know how you catch them? You see this plant here? Everyone would get in the water with one of these broken off in one hand and in the other hand. Now see how hard it is to get through there? So you've got in your hands here the next person, the next person, the next person, the next person. So suddenly you're like a big net and you just swish them up and down and you're chanting a little song, you know. Wala, ngarning, obel, ngarning. So it means wala, food, eating, and obel, full of food. Obel is your stomach. And you're just chanting as you're holding them there. And then the others just come in and pick out whichever ones they want. And they, depending how many people. And you've got all the fish you need. Just through that simple activity. Interesting, isn't it? Everything is here. You know why? Can anyone tell me why our people would have to do that? It's obvious. No? Because there were no shops. You couldn't go down to Coles or Woolies or the deli because they weren't there. So that meant you had to find whatever was there to eat. And everything was eaten fresh. You know why it was eaten fresh? Because there were no freezers and no fridge. So that meant you got the best food to eat because it was fresh. And do you know where lactose, is it intolerant?
Intolerance, yeah.
Because we had no big animals to get milk from. So milk's no good for us. Interesting, isn't it? Really interesting. And there wasn't much sugar. I I'm addicted to sugar. I'm an addict. I love a apricot Danish and a half-strength cappuccino. Isn't that awful?
Is that what's over there?
Oh, maybe. With a bit of luck. So, here we are in this beautiful place, listening to all these beautiful natural sounds. We have to hear those sounds. That constant buzz. Try and cancel out that constant buzz you can hear over there of the vehicles. You know, when we go out on the country, it's so obvious that that buzz is not there. And you just hear the stillness and the quietness, and it's so beautiful. Then there's all the opportunities that exist to learn. What's the name of this? You know? Wouldn't that be nice to know? You can learn that. There's books with pictures of the flowers and the leaves, and then you can look at it like that. But if you crush the leaf and smell it, what a beautiful smell. Want to try it? Looks like someone's crushed all the leaves on that one. But just try it and smell it. It's such a sweet smell. You can taste it as well. What's it called? I call that tryptamine. Tryptamine. And it has a beautiful little flower. And obviously another myrtaceae, like the eucalyptus. Aromatic leaves.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're out in another part, up off the rivers, you know, you might find 10 or 15 different species. Absolutely beautiful.
Are there many mushrooms you can eat? I know it's probably late in the season now. But...
I'm always reluctant to talk about fungi when there's children.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Because some you can eat and some you can't. And the ones you can't, they'll kill you. And there's the whole range from that toxicity through to what you can eat and what it does to you on the way. Yeah, so I leave that.
What about from mouth things? I know you can eat the peppermint leaves,
Yes.
the antiseptic, but
Yes.
you get
If you've got
ulcers and
gum
stuff
problems
sometimes?
and things like that,
Yeah.
the red gum,
Red gum.
that's Mary,
Yep.
not the river red gum,
Right up.
eucalyptus Mary.
That's where you get a thumbprint worth of it. And that's your dose. Yeah.
That's it. And also if you've got a hollow tooth and it's aching, get a wad of that, put it in the hollow tooth and bite down on it. It won't taste like tropical fruit salad. But what happens is the astringents in that resin numbs the nerve and deadens it for about 3 hours so you can cope again, because toothaches, you know, they're really difficult to cope with at times. Okay, beautiful. So, what do we do? Take our chairs again? Oh, I just want to mention other fish in the river. You've got bream, lots of bream still there now. They're really tough and hardy, but I wouldn't eat them myself, but I know people who do from the river. You've got tailor, herring, cobbler. I've even seen what they call flounder, little flatfish with 2 eyes on one side of their body and white underneath.
Funny, isn't it?
Yeah, they're quite funny to look at. There's a gudgeon googly-eyed and bordering on being am I being respectful to it, cobbler, but they don't have the spikes, whereas the cobbler has the spikes. And that's the fish that was in the story with Qualla the mullet. When Qualla went through its story and had to show people what it was or where it is. Catfish, that's a cobbler. Yeah. And of course, some of the rivers, they have catfish that weigh 70 pounds. You know, they sell them as silver cobbler. And you can always find them in the marketplace. And they grow really big. But we don't have them here, thank goodness. There's a shark that's often found in the river. They're dangerous little sharks. They only grow about so big and they're called bull sharks. You've got to be really careful.
You one at my nana's friend's leg, not far from here.
They take your leg off just like that.
Near the bridge, wherever that is.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Just down here a little
spot.
bit further.
Don't want that.
30, 40, 50 years
Yes.
ago it was. Long time ago.
Wow. The biggest edible fish in there is a mulloway, and that's their local Aboriginal name. Some people call them jewel fish, or jewfish, because they have jewels in their head where their ears are. And if you boil the head up and take it, perfect size for earrings. And I've seen people use them for that. But they're a fish that go upstream and they croak like a frog. And you'll hear them at night in the cool, calm, and like that, really loud and deep sound. And they'll go up into the tributary. I've seen them on the canning. They use their tail to swish all the sand away and then lay their eggs in amongst the little pebbly stones that are there. And then just swim back down the river again. Huge fish. Some of them this big. Not as many as there used to be. Nowhere near the same numbers. Swans used to be really popular. Provided a lot of food. Swans. The ones that were eaten were the ones that still had the grey feathers on them. And even when the new people came here, you can find in the museum some marketing that was done for swans, and people used to buy them for so many shillings each. And they were the ones you'll see in the pictures. All right, folks.
Were prawns
Of
common in
course,
here?
prawns were common.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And they would come into the shallows where the sweet water was running into the river, and that's where they'd lay their eggs. And the little ones would thrive in that area and grow really quickly and then swim back out again.
crabs are starting to come back.
Yeah,
in
the crabs
too.
come up the river. That's the blue swimmer. Yes, mussels as well.
Were they eaten by Noongar
Our
people?
people stopped eating mussels quite some years back. You will find the odd midden here and there, but stopped eating them.
Because they clean the river?
Yeah,
Repair the river?
yeah. They're a filter feeder, and they take the toxins out of the water and they purify it. What else?
Just here, Noel, there's a lot of oyster shells.
Along the edge.
Yeah, was
Yeah,
that natural?
We
or-
call that the scales of the serpent. And when you pick them up and look at them, you'll see the beautiful colours of the rainbow inside some of them. And we say they're the scales off the side of this rainbow serpent. And you'll find them along Garvey Park up further. Is it Garvey? Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And other spots. All right, so I don't know about you. I'm thinking that the smell of that soup's a little bit overpowering.
A few more minutes, I'll say,
A couple of more minutes. Beauty. Any more questions as we're waiting?
what was the name of that pink and purple flower?
The pink and purple
Yeah, this
flower.
one.
That one there?
Yeah.
That one there. I don't know. It looks to me like a sweet pea, but it's not a sweet pea because it's a vine. I think some sweet peas are vines, but
Is that a weed?
yeah, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a weed.
It's like a morning glory leaf,
Yeah, it's taken off.
but with a pea.
I see a lot of it
Yeah.
up in there just now when we were there. The other creeper is definitely a morning glory creeper. I don't know the name of that one though. It's got something to do now. I'll find out what it is. I bet there's a couple of old people up on the top there that know exactly what that's called. There's some research there. Anyone else?
I've got a question on Carol.
Yeah.
Would there have been eels in this water here?
Eels. Not to the best of my knowledge, no. The nearest you would get to an eel would be the eel-tailed catfish. But no.
Did you get the freshwater lamprey up this way?
Lamprey,
Yeah, the freshwater one.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, I know they're down
Yeah.
south and much better to get them up.
I haven't seen them in here. No. Yeah, definitely the eel-tailed catfish. My dad used to catch them, he said. And, you know, they can be quite big. They tie themselves in knots once you catch them. To see them, it's amazing. Beautiful to eat.
They can give you a bite too.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah.
Mm.
So are there still native bees around?
Yes. They're hard to find. Yeah. And the way to find them is you get a tiny little down feather, white down feather, and sometimes it's just enough to put a little bit of your spit onto your nail, then touch the little down feather on that. If you've caught one of those little bees, put it on its back. So it's got to be a tiny piece, and you watch it fly. And as it goes up into there, you'll see the white of that feather, and then where it lands, that's where you'll find it. They're really hard to find, the nest. You've got to be really clever and vigilant. Children like this, they have no troubles at all. Good eyesight, can catch little bees, attach these things, and catch them. And sugar bag, we call it. And the honey itself's like a fermented liqueur. It's really stunningly beautiful.
I've heard them called that in the Kimberley.
Yes, my mother is from the Pilbara. They have it there. Yeah. Okay. How are we going? Everyone right? Awesome. So we've got frogs on the menu and duck's eggs. No, I'm only joking. I think it's pumpkin soup, isn't it? Something like that. Great way to spend a couple of hours in the morning. Yeah, hope you've enjoyed it thus far.
Thank you.
And have something to take away and think about as you go. Awesome. There's a kingfisher here, sacred kingfisher, and if you're really lucky you'll see the blue one, the azure kingfisher. They're usually close to the water's edge. They'll sit there. There's not a safe fish around them. They've got beautiful eyesight. Down there and touch them, quick and flat. Awesome.